Hello, everybody. This is Paul Herman, the Prince of Motivation and the host of Zaka Presents My Journey. We're creating this vulnerable and positive platform where you get inspired and motivated from different leaders from our community. Today, our guest is Aisha Losche, who is a Senior Vice President, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging at Hill Holliday. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you on the show. I mean, I definitely want to know a little bit about this title that you got going on, because there's a lot of words right there. I know that's came with a long line of work. And but before we actually get into that, could you just let the listeners know a little bit more about yourself and where you're from growing up?
Absolutely. As Paul mentioned, I'm Aisha Losche. I grew up in Brockton, Massachusetts. I'll be very specific because I'm not from Boston, and Brockton and Boston are very different.
Okay.
I went to Sacred Heart University for my undergrad, Curry for my MBA, and I also have certifications in diversity and inclusion, mental health, first aid, executive coaching and leadership, and a couple other things I got going on. But yes, so that's a little bit about me. I'm a mom of 3 and a wife to 1.
Okay. And I like that. Hey, look, and when it comes down to, you said Massachusetts, I know you had a clear separation of Boston and where you're actually from. Yeah. How is the culture in Mass growing up? What was that like for you?
See, growing up in Brockton and a Haitian household, there's the 3 L's in Creole, which I'm not going to try to say because I'll probably say them wrong, but it means school, church, and what's the third one?
Is it work?
No. Oh, I'm going to remember it. But it's about church, being at school, and being at home. And so I spent time in a predominantly Catholic education. So my experiences is not one of what folks think of in Brockton. You know, I went to church, I went to my school, I came home, I was in Girl Scouts, played a lot of sports, was singing in my church choirs. And so growing up was a very kind of humdrum life, if you will. But it was really exciting because of just the city that I was in. There was a lot of diversity. And then just growing up with my West Indian roots, always had a little something happening on the weekends at my house. If we weren't having family here, we were driving to Long Island to see my family there.
So you're saying that the area you grew up in was very diverse. So you were, at a young age, you kind of started to fall in love or be around that diversity.
You know what it was? It was the lack of diversity, quite frankly, that made me want to do more of the work, because I was the one and only up until maybe 3rd grade. I was the only Black child in my classroom. And so I needed to understand why that was, right? Where was the diversity? Where was the inclusion? Where was the level of belonging, right? And it comes down to the equitable practices where my parents worked, unbeknownst to me, 2 to 3, 4 jobs to send me to these schools, right? And so after being in these spaces, I kind of took my business degree from Sacred Heart, applied it to human resources, but then kind of evolved into this diversity space to kind of help an overall corporate environment, but hopefully overall society, right? When I think about larger impact and why I do this work is to have people really feel included wherever they are.
Now, I couldn't help but listen when you said the Haitian culture. So being Haitian, could you talk to us a little bit about like that Haitian culture growing up? Like how has it influenced you in your career?
Yes. And so I'm very mindful that my Haitian experience is different than anyone else's. I'll talk about my Haitian experience with 2 parents that immigrated from Haiti to Canada, Mexico, and then ended up in Brockton, Massachusetts. My family was religious, but they were strict. They really wanted us to go to school. Education was something that was extremely important to my family. And so I wanted to, do what children do, is make their parents proud. And so I went to school, got good grades, got involved in a lot of things. But the Haitian culture, my grandmother and my aunt lived around the corner, so I could walk to their houses, having family, lots of food, having rice for dinner most nights. It was something that gave me the sense of vibrancy, I guess, being in other spaces. I got to see my family and the dancing and the music and the fun, and having that made me kind of feel the whole the whole love of my family and the culture. That was how it was shared with me through family moments and
Hmm.
a lot of food.
Oh, hey, look, I know the Haitian culture is very big on music and food. So shout
Mhm.
out to that. I know in the earlier you said something about like it was a lack of diversity. You were like the only African American, and so like you said third grade or
Mhm.
okay. Now, could you express us like some of the challenges you faced like growing up that kind of inspired you to kind of move into your career?
Yeah. So the challenges, and assimilation is something that I again learned doing this work, was something that I could do well, right? And so I felt othered only a very few times because we were in a church community as well, so that made kind of the inclusion a little bit easier. But it was really around when other students of color came in, the white students in the class thought there'd be an automatic kinship, right? Like, oh, Aisha, there's another Black student in the class. Like, obviously, this person's going to be your boyfriend. And I'm like, I don't know that man. I'm sorry to that man. I don't know him. And so it was really an opportunity for me to explain that, or not even explain because I was too young, but for me to be like, no, it's not that simple. Like, I can get to know him just as long as I've got to know all of you. Like, he could be my friend. It was really having people understand that like my lived experience wouldn't be the same as his. And then as I got into high school, I started to see more of that. There's actually a book written by Dr. Beverly Tate called "Why Are All the Black Students Sitting Together in the Cafeteria," I believe. And there's books around kind of how, folks from marginalized backgrounds kind of come together in these predominantly white spaces. And I noticed that in high school, and then moving into Sacred Heart, where I was fortunate enough to be part of a multicultural diversity sorority, I was able to fully see the lens of inclusion and see that there's so much more than what I've seen in my high school and earlier learning. And so from there, working in HR, I thought that that would be the best caveat to start to teach folks just more around inclusion and just being better people. And I feel like after college or wherever you stop learning, the workplace is the next place you're going to learn for the longest periods of your lifetime. And so I wanted to be part of that learning culture for many folks going forward.
Mm, okay, I see. Now, when you talk about your parents being of the Haitian culture, what was some of like the qualities or the traits that they were able to pass down to you that kind of helped inspire you or kind of like navigate you in the earlier career?
Yeah. Well, the traits that my parents showed me they were very generous, they were caring, they were hardworking. As I mentioned, they were working lots of jobs to make sure that we all had what we had. And so that was skills and things that I took with me as I went into school, when I went into college, I went into the workplace, right? Just put your head down and get your work done. But again, learning those things and being in a corporate America, I learned that that's not all you need to progress in your career. You need to have relationships. You need to understand the kind of the politics of your organizations. And my mom was a nurse and my dad was an engineer. They may not have had to play those games in kind of their crafts, right, in their disciplines. But when you're in these spaces, you needed to kind of understand how to do that. And so that took me a little bit longer. But now I understand that there's so much more to than just being a good worker or a good student. There's other pieces that kind of help propel people forward in careers.
Now, you mentioned Sacred Heart University. You said something along the lines of a sorority, a diverse, multicultural sorority. That experience, how was that for you?
It was wonderful. It was one of my favorite parts of going to Sacred Heart University because I was able to just learn and be brothers to some very distinguished gentlemen. And so it was an opportunity for us to come together to help the city of Bridgeport, to have people from all walks of life that I didn't have exposure to, right, being in predominantly white schooling institutions. It was really an amazing opportunity to make new sisters and to do some philanthropy, which again, I did before, in other spaces, a food drive, but really what we did within these organizations was so much more than that. And that was really impactful.
Mm. Now, I know 20 to 30 years ago, like, diversity, inclusion, and belonging wasn't as like looked at on a higher scale. I know that things are starting to, there's going to be there's like a little shift right now. How do you feel about that?
I welcome the shift, right? When you talk about where it was 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, it was about gender parity. That's what folks felt safe and comfortable talking about was let's get women in leadership. And that's what happened. And, there's studies and things that I don't have on hand, but can send to you that we can say that affirmative action helped white women more than any other marginalized group. And so it was extremely important for the evolution of where we are now. And after the killing of George Floyd, a year ago, this week, right? It was 2 years ago, excuse me. It was a needed pivotal change for what this work really means, for us to dig deep, to talk about race, to talk about the barriers and the roadblocks that have put up for people from marginalized and historically excluded groups to be able to succeed and I'm talking about corporate spaces, but I'm sure in other spaces as well. You think about academia, you think about the trades, you think about how businesses get funded, right? Financial reasons. There are so many things that folks just thought there were this barriers, invisible barriers, but we knew them to be very real. And so the evolution of this work, and that's why my title is so long, which is a great segue, it started with diversity inclusion. But we knew that equity was an extremely important part of that equation because not everyone needs the same things. And so you have to make sure that what you're giving your talent is equitable. And then the sense of belonging is really around, okay, you have diversity, you have inclusion, but do I belong here? Do you value my work? Do you see me? And so that's how, the evolution of the title and even this work has continued to grow to ensure that people are coming in holistically as themselves to do their best work without having to assimilate to anyone's ideas what professionalism is or what corporatism, being corporate is.
True. Now, in corporate America, like I know that, like you said, and we were talking about the shift is there. Like, what do you think is like the biggest roadblock to kind of like stopping that from being like across the world kind of thing, where everyone is looking at it as like something as a priority? Like, what's the biggest roadblock you think it is?
It's people acknowledging that it's real. That's something that we talk about a lot at work is racism is real and it affects all of us. There's a great book by Heather McGhee called The Sum of Us, and she gives a story around pools, right? Community pools that were all in different towns and cities in the 50s and 60s. And I'm sure you've seen movies from that time. Everyone goes to the community pools. And we think about where do they all go, right? And what happened to a lot of those pools was that when they had to integrate, towns decided rather than have little brown and black children swim in those pools, they'll just fill them with cement and close them down, right? Now, while that affects brown children and black children, that also affects little white children that are able no longer to swim. And so it's really around folks acknowledging and seeing and understanding our history for all of it to move forward, not just here in the US, but globally.
Mm-hmm. Now, that's the fact that you were able to break that down. I mean, I know I've heard stories of that, but it's when you talk about it, it kind of brings me back to like when I was in those history classes and hearing about these things, man, like this can't be true. Why would people even go to that extent? But like you said, racism is real and it still exists. And, it's very hard to kind of like, trying to change people's mindsets. But I feel like as a community, like how you're doing it right now is just having strong leaders to kind of like navigate that and bridge the gap, because it's all about just people just having knowledge, because, that unity and diversity always leads to knowledge,
Absolutely.
Now I know you received your MBA. How was that experience for you?
It was great. I for someone who didn't think they liked school, I guess I do like school because I continuously go back. My MBA was a good program. I went to Curry College where they had a part-time MBA, so I was able to continue to work and get my program part-time. So I went, did some things asynchronously on Blackboard, I think the platform was, and then we would have a 4-hour class once a week. And it was really eye-opening to be able to see and understand more about like the financials of companies. Working in the department I am, human resources, as you get closer to leadership, you get more access to that. But in the beginnings, you don't really talk about balance sheets and P&Ls or marketing campaigns or analysis or all the other courses that I took within my MBA program. So that just gave me the exposure to it. And that was also 10 years ago that I got my MBA. Now there's so many opportunities for free learning online. If you have LinkedIn Learning, there's opportunities to learn different things. So it was a great experience, but there's always now, I think, even more robust ways of getting more learning and hands-on experience. And then, things that I weren't doing 10 years ago because of, being kind of taught, you speak when you're spoken to, things like that. I wasn't asking for different opportunities. So my MBA helped me kind of raise my hand a little bit more, feeling a little bit more confident with that degree to say, hey, I've seen this and I want to now apply my learning in the workplace.
Mm-hmm. And then I see that you also went on to Cornell. Is that correct?
Yes. And that's where I got my diversity and inclusion certification back in 2018.
How long did it take to get that certification?
That program is weeks long. So I want to say it was 10 weeks long.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it was also, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, how was that experience?
It was foundational for me. I knew I wanted to get into this work, but again, I wanted to make sure I had the education to facilitate it. And so Cornell is all online. It was a great opportunity again, because by 2018, I had 2 kids. One was 2 and one was 5. And so it was an opportunity for me to continue my learning. But that program was able to give me kind of foundational diversity and inclusion metrics and have the right language to kind of do this work more professionally, as opposed to, I was participating in employee resource groups. I was, helping look at policy and doing things kind of in an ad hoc way, but getting that certification kind of helped me wrap my whole experiences up in a nice box and then give me additional resources and skills to be able to do the work holistically and at a wider scale.
Mm-hmm. Now, after graduating from Cornell, getting a certificate from Cornell, getting your MBA, you start to move into the corporate environment. Could you express us some of like the obstacles you kind of face and some of them, how you overcome them?
Yeah, working for as long as I have, and I've been working since I was 16. So started off working at Oscar Drug and Dunkin' Donuts, and before that, babysitting, because I was always about, having some coins to go to do what I had to do. But working in corporate America, it's been a really interesting ride. And I think I have grown throughout it just because I've seen the vast diversity of just leadership and how people run different organizations, and then really finding my allies and finding folks that would sponsor me or mentor me. That has been huge, just because, again, growing up, I felt like I had to just kind of play small, but seeing how people were moving and shaking within corporate America and having those sponsors and leaders, they were able to kind of coach me on how to make my impact known and my presence known in different ways. And that led me to many different opportunities within Sapient when I was there, and then now at Hill Holliday as well.
And when you were in this environment, corporate environment, did you feel like the work that you were doing was not being seen?
Potentially, in some cases, absolutely. Being an individual contributor or, just kind of doing my work and not letting folks know that, like, I closed that really important role that we needed to fill for whatever client it was, right? People, that's the thing about advocating for yourself, is that while you think your manager's paying attention, they really have other things that they're focused on. Like, they worry about you, but they're not worrying about all the wins you have. So one of the things that I started to do and got coached on was kind of keeping a wins list, right? So you open a PowerPoint, you make 12 slides. This is what I've accomplished in January. This is what I've accomplished in February. And you kind of make sure that people know that you're doing these things. And then you also want to let them know the aspirations you have to do other things. And so being in these environments, it was helpful to get coached that way, because I felt myself kind of being stagnated. I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. How can I let folks know that I have other skills and talents? And it really was from there, opening my aspirations and letting people know that, saying it out loud. That's when I start to see more opportunities opened for me.
Now, obviously, you have a very big title and a big role, in a sense. Like, I know that going to work every single day and knowing that you have a mission, something you have to kind of deliver. How do you feel about that pressure being on you, to deliver that, being a minority woman?
It's heavy at times, especially this week when I put my kids back on the bus, or, thinking about last week and not wanting to go to the grocery store. It's a heavy burden, especially that, my lived experience it's hard to separate, right? I'm not doing another craft. I'm not doing accounting. So it's not that I can, have something coming in and then go look at some spreadsheets or look at money or do something different. I'm coming into work trying to be strong for others while sometimes I'm not feeling strong myself. But I do know that this work will improve the livelihoods and close the wealth income gap. McKinsey has done a fantastic job doing analysis around the Black wealth gap and how we can close it. And so being part of the change and being part of breaking some systemic things, even though it might be within one company, sharing it more broadly, ensuring that folks know that it can be changed, like that's what keeps me going.
And for individuals that are in corporate America, what do you feel is the biggest tool right now or resource people could do or to kind of create more diversity and inclusion?
Well, listen to your people of color that are in your organizations. They know what they're talking about. Utilizing employee or business resource groups to create communities of belonging. Put people of color in the roles that they deserve, right? When you look at leadership, if you're trying to talk the talk, you have to walk the walk. So when we're looking at your board of directors, when we're looking at your senior leadership teams, are they reflective of the United States, right? We all know the different census numbers. And so that's what folks can do. And then others, if you don't feel like you're in those positions, hold your leaders accountable, ask, inquisitive questions, but really just doing what they're supposed to be doing. We're out here, we're making things happen, and just hiring the right talent, I think, is paramount, but also making the environment that they're coming into inclusive and welcoming so they can thrive.
Mm-hmm. Now, through your experience of corporate America, like what was like a big breakthrough in your career that helped you see corporate America differently?
My last role at Publicis Group, where I was doing very similar work, in the summer of 2020, I was working alongside a phenomenal woman named Ronnie Dickerson Stewart, and we had a moment to bring everyone together across the U.S. to talk about what was happening, to make programming, to have people feel seen, to give learning, to give leaderships the right tool. And in putting together that day of reflection and information, it changed my trajectory of how I view this work, quite frankly, and knowing that, we don't have to come at it in any type of soft way, like the facts are the facts. And it helped kind of open everyone's eyes to what really needed to be changed, and therefore made it a little bit easier to then have those conversations about making change, because we could see what we were doing wrong for tens of years, decades of years in corporate America. So that was really an inflection point for me.
Now, you mentioned Publicis Group. I know you were the VP of Talent Engagement over there. Can you tell us about like maybe two things that you accomplished that made you proud while you were at the company?
Yes, absolutely. It was around, I was tasked with organizing and facilitating and managing all of our business resource groups. So at the time, there was 12, and before I left, there was 14. So we started global initiatives around sustainability and green. We had a great presence around LGBTQIA talent. We had a group that was started in one of our other agencies that we were able to scale nationally for our more seasoned talent, right? So when you think about business resource groups, sometimes you only think about certain affinities, but folks who have been in the industry for 20, 30 years, they also have needs. They also want to come together as communities, right? As some, parents groups are talking about sending kids to daycare, there's a whole nother spectrum of parenting on the other side as well. And that group was also able to evolve while I was there. So that was really exciting to be a partner to all of our business resource group at Publicis Group. And then really our learning and our learning partners, working with great companies like Korn Ferry and Cook Ross, Bold Culture, they were able to bring really dynamic and innovative learning to our talent. So I was extremely proud to be able to be part of that network. And then lastly, at Publicis Group, they have a great tool internally for communication. And we were able to kind of build out what that looked like from a diversity and inclusion perspective to ensure that not only from the US, from a global perspective, we were able to share and have connection with talent.
And from there, you're now at Hill Holliday, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and how is that experience? I mean, I'm assuming that you've taken all the experiences and all your certifications and degrees over to Hill Holiday.
Absolutely, and gotten more. So it's been a really interesting opportunity to be part of a senior leadership more closely, working alongside the CEO, the CFO on a daily, right? So I'm not working with just my peers or other people on my team. I'm really managing up, and so that has been a really great experience to have the purview and the insights of those leaders. But we were able to kind of build new things, found a mentorship program, again, continuously building business resource groups. We have a new one that started last month, our Hill Holiday agency. And so it's really like the work that I do is really around just growth and belonging. And, we're starting to evolve our hiring practices and ensuring that we're removing bias. And so we have a lot of great projects going on to ensure that Hill Holiday has already made a big commitment to this work before I joined. And so I'm happy to continue, moving that forward alongside our leadership to ensure that it happens.
Nah, wow. And where is Hill Holiday located?
We are in Boston, Massachusetts, in the Seaport area. We also have a New York office right by Bryant Park. We have a sister agency in Greenville, South Carolina, and then we have folks remote across the U.S. because, as we learned through COVID, Zoom is a very good work office, and so we have great talent all across the U.S.
Do you work from home now?
I do. I do go in the office about once every other week just to check in and see folks and maybe have a team meeting or two, but I work from home most days.
Now, that is I'm thinking about it now, like that you are right. When this pandemic hit us all, like a lot of people were like, oh wait, Zoom exists. It was always there, but it's like everyone has started to run to it even more. That's when I knew I should have purchased stocks in Zoom. I messed up. I was like, my business degree, I should have applied it at that time.
I hear you. Same with Bitcoin. I missed that.
Yeah, so you're impacting the world a different way, which is with the individuals themselves, making people feel like they belong in and, all those other stuff. It's important, because that brings the culture of a company together. People talk about like, how do companies become successful? They got to start with the people first. Yes, you obviously have to have a really good leader, right? But the leader needs to know that the team is just as valuable as themselves. Absolutely. So having a diverse team, having people of all different walks of life will help provide, a different mindset or different ideas at that point in time. And, people can't be afraid of that, because people have to know that, especially in corporate America, because, sometimes it's very strict. It's like, this is what we do and that's it. People are not open to change. And that kind of scares people sometimes. But as you can see, we went from a pandemic to Zoom, working from home. There's a change, people's got to be able to pivot. But it's to each his own. But I'm glad that there's individuals like yourself that are in this position that really, truly believe in it. I want to kind of ask you this question now, because I know that from just talking to you, like I could hear it in your voice, and obviously from your bio and all the stuff that you've done, there's people out there that, pretend to be in your shoes and say that they could do this and they're doing that, but they're really not, bringing people together. They're not about the inclusion and definitely not about the diversity. They're like, they just want to say it in order to kind of create that buzz at their corporate environment. What do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, your talent will see right through it. And, McKinsey's been saying this for years that, companies with good diversity make more money. So if you're just talking the talk but not walking the walk, you're not gonna get the benefits of having the folks in the room and making great work for whatever you're making, widgets, insurance, advertising, whatever you have. Like, it's just not going to be better. So talent, as we talked about, Zoom is an office now. Talent has an opportunity to walk away. We have seen in the great resignation or the great reimagination, folks are really going to where they feel valued. And so if you find a company is not doing what they said they were going to do, there are so many opportunities out there for folks to go and be where they're valued. And so I encourage folks to ask the questions, be inquisitive, hold people accountable. But if it's not changing, then you have to do what's best for you. I've been saying this to a lot of different folks, is put your mask on first. If you know when you're on a plane and the air comes down, you have to take care of yourself. And so that is what folks should do if they feel like the work isn't being done.
And in corporate America, like what is ways that like, corporations can implement, or things they could do to implement to kind of like retain minority employees?
Yeah, I mean, pay them what they're worth, give them the money, all the coins. That's extremely important.
We better collect Mario Luigi.
Hi, it's the pay gaps are there and they're real. And so you want to make sure you're paying people equitably and you're giving folks opportunity for promotion equitably, giving people sponsorship opportunities to be in different spaces, not keeping people in box or swim lanes of, you can only be X, you can't ever explore Y, like giving people opportunity to have other chances to see different types of work, and then just give them the chance to lead without imposing anyone else's bias or how they feel like it should be done. Like, it will get done if you let people do it the way that they need to. And so making sure that folks have autonomy to grow and make mistakes and fail fast and often, but every time you fail, you're closer to a win. So that's really how it should be.
And I know that that comes down to leaders, right? What do you feel like a leader in corporate America, and let's focus on that area, like what should a leader do at this point in time to kind of improve in their own self-growth in order to kind of help make sure that the diversity and inclusion is more of a priority at their company?
Yeah, they need to understand it. They really need to fully grasp what this work is. It's not a check in the box. It's not putting a person of color with a long title in a space and think that you're done in this work. It really requires accountability. It really requires for folks to have checks and balances and ensure that they are doing what they said they're going to do. It's really about hiring and retaining great talent. It's really, there's a lot of different things they could be doing, but the focus needs to be on ensuring that their leadership teams look like the people they're trying to attract, and then that they have opportunities for growth and that they're building out different things. And it's not just about mentorship programs or things of that nature. It's really around giving people P&L responsibilities, giving them opportunities to see it and be it within a corporate space. So leaders really need to be sponsoring talent for new opportunities to grow.
Now, as you're talking about that, I'm thinking about, this, a lot of immigrant employees might have the concern of like speaking up and advocating for themselves. The worries come up and they start to question, and before you know it, they don't really advocate for themselves. So like, how do you navigate through something like that?
Absolutely. So I'm a facilitator of a program that Google has founded called #IamRemarkable. And in that workshop, you talk about, it's for women and underrepresented groups to work on self-promotion. And so if you are nervous or it's not something that is innate to you, right? It's outside of your culture to want to talk about yourself. Practice in small ways. Start with your one-on-one meetings with your manager on one win in 1 month, right? And then next time there's an opportunity for folks to introduce yourself, or if you're doing some work, like, yes, last month we had this win and this month I'm going to be working on this. Just really flexing that muscle, because it only gets easier with practice, right? So same as being at the free throw line and trying to sink that shot, you have to practice, promoting yourself in different spaces. And so if you can, and you can even do it with your friend group. I know we all have group chats. So if you have a good day at work, go to your group chat and be like, listen, I had a presentation today and I did amazing. And let your circle clap for you and cheer for you. And you can practice in many different spaces that will become more natural for you to do it in spaces where you might feel uncomfortable. But discomfort creates growth.
That is true. Some people run away from that discomfort, but you are right. In struggle, it does come growth. We just have to go through it, at the end of the day, to kind of see it. But you are right about the whole thing about leaders need to acknowledge and about minorities in a sense do need to work on, speaking up when they feel like they know what they deserve. And that's a very hard thing. People could say, well, that's why people undercut themselves. And then, those issues come up where they might not feel appreciated at their company. But then it's like, did you speak up when you had the chance?
Yeah. And, it's twofold. It's having the opportunity to, give yourself and to self-advocate, but I'm very much aware that we have I call it the messy middle of managers who may not listen, who have bias, who have benefited from the systemic racism that has been in corporate America. And so as much as one might be able to self-advocate, we have to acknowledge kind of the larger ecosystem that we're trying to dismantle. And so we want to make sure that if you don't find, an advocate or a mentor in the space that you're in, kind of going around them and finding other ways to be on teams where people will value you and see the value that you bring. And again, it could be at the same company, it could be somewhere else, but there is there's still a lot of roadblocks and bias within corporate that we're working on fixing, but it still comes up unconsciously or implicitly.
True.
And especially in the Zoom world, there's proximity bias. And so while I might be doing the best work here at home and my boss is in the office and sees someone across the hall, they might be, favoring this person. So you have to stay on top of so many different things. There's so many balls to juggle in this corporate landscape. And that's the other piece that I was talking about, that kind of political, relational pieces of being in this space. It's not just about doing your work, it's kind of managing all of it.
It is a lot to manage. It definitely is. And so someone like yourself, like who do you look to as like a mentor, as a coach to kind of get you going and inspiring you?
That's a great question. So, I've named one. Ronnie Dickerson-Stewart is an idol, an amazing woman. I have another mentor, Sandra Sims-Williams, who is now the Chief Diversity Officer of Nielsen, who's been just a lifeline. I have a number of peer mentors within my sister circle that I reached out to, my cousins. There are a lot of folks that I have kind of within my ecosystem that help me, that I can bounce ideas off of, let them know when I failed, get feedback on what I could do differently. And so it's been, even I have a group in my group chat called the Preschool Moms, where all of our sons went to preschool together, and then we come back together and connect about different things about parenting. So you kind of have to have a lot of different board of directors for different things in your life, and having them as a resource, staying engaged, supporting them as they support you, you can find the right help throughout your career.
I also seen it in the bio. You're also a certified executive and leadership coach and a qualified administration for like Intercultural Development Index. Mm-hmm. Could you just tell the listeners, what does that mean?
Sure. So the coaching is, pretty straightforward. I have been certified and kind of doing executive and leadership coaching, helping people assess themselves and find growth in what they're trying to do. In regards to the IDI, the Intercultural Inventory, I'm a qualified administrator. And what that is an assessment where folks are taken, they're graded on a continuum from denial to adaptation. And why I use that tool is to kind of help people see themselves in this world and how they're included in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and where they are on the continuum. And it comes with a plan, and then I coach them through that plan so they can see how their upbringing has formulated what they think today, how their communities formulate how they think today. I mentioned I grew up in Brockton, Massachusetts, and there's kind of, when you're leaving Boston, you get two highways. You get Route 3 and you get Route 24. And Route 3 is very homogenous. And Route 24 is a lot of diversity, and that's not by mistake, right? That is by design. That is by redlining. That's by bad policy. And so having these different certifications, I'm able to coach people through their journeys, but then give them an objective tool like the IDI to see themselves and then have them grow in this work, because it's a journey.
And everything else is a journey, especially when, we're talking about diversity and inclusion. This is going to be a long process that's going to take years for it to be on the platform where it needs to be, and individuals like yourself are constantly pushing it and trying to evolve it. So there has to be some moment in your career where it's like your proudest achievement. Could you speak about that?
Sure. It was definitely that day that I mentioned earlier, bringing together 18,000 people for a moment to discuss what was happening in the US, but to have an opportunity for learning. I really felt passionate and proud of what we were able to accomplish as a team. And, the other piece too, just being able to survive as myself has been a proud moment. Being in the spaces, still being, one of few in predominantly white spaces, but being my authentic self, right? Like, so 10 years ago, relaxed hair, navy suit, all the things, pink nails, whatever I had to do to kind of assimilate. Now it's around, my curls. I wear a head wrap, my bold lip. Like, I have grown into who I truly am. And that has been a very proud moment for me in corporate America, for me to be fully me and not have to try to be anything else.
And if you had to, I would say, give it some type of advice to a young immigrant child moving into US, hearing this interview and all the beautiful things and all the information that you've given, like what would you give to that individual as some sort of piece of advice?
Still listen to your parents, but explore, absolutely ask questions, network, right? Meet new people, join different organizations. I'm part of a great group called Boston While Black. And it's just a great opportunity to network and have great programming and learning and just meeting different people from different cultures. And so it's really around growing your network, learning from different people and their experiences, and finding ways to win in different ways that may not be what your parents have thought for you, but you can grow your way.
That is, I like the fact that you said you got to get involved.
Yes.
You got to get involved. That's probably one of the best ways to kind of advance as someone, whether in corporate America or any type of job or even on a team. You got to get involved. Just being a player on the bench is not enough. Just being a staff member who just comes to work is not enough. But once you get involved, it kind of shows your a sense of belonging. And that's how, work ethic starts to speak for itself. And then before you know it, it leads to so many other things. Now, my last thing to you, I know you do a lot of mentorship towards younger individuals and stuff like that. I know that the Zaka platform, that's something that we're looking to evolve in the many more months to come. So we would love for you to, be involved in that and giving, these types of workshops to these individuals and kind of speaking a little bit more about your journey. And so I would welcome that. But I thank you so much for being a part of today's show and expressing everything that goes on in your career. And congratulations on being a mom of 3 and still being able to produce heavily like this at work and still make an influence, not just on your family, but also in your community. I know your husband's very proud of you, and I know your kids, and they might not understand right now what mom really does, but there'll be a point in time where they're going to look back and say, that's my mom. She did that. So congratulations.
Thank you so much. I look forward to coming back and being part of the mentorship pieces of it. And I wish you all the best. This is going to be an amazing opportunity for folks, and I look forward to being a partner.
Okay. And to the listeners, if you want to hear more stories like Aisha, check us out on ZakaConnect.com or follow our feed Zaka, wherever you listen to your podcast. And Aisha, thank you so much for being a part of the show today.